Anthony for breakfast, Triple M Albany. We're catching up with HR expert Jonathan Wolfrey. Thanks very much for your time again, Jonathan.
No worries, my pleasure.
Lots of lines are drawn in life, and we oftentimes, we kind of push our luck many times and try to push those lines sometimes. But what we're seeing now is a regular occurrence happening. We've got news stories, people losing their jobs because, they had a bit of a joke at the workplace or doing things that previously have been accepted, but that doesn't seem to be the case now. It's like the world's changed, women react differently, men react differently. So how do I know when I'm getting close to that line? Let's say the workplace. If I'm going to do a joke or if I'm going to,
Yeah, for sure. It's a challenging one. Sometimes working in the HR profession, I come along and people accuse me of being the fun police on behalf of everyone in HR and highlight what they used to be allowed to do and what they perceive HR no longer lets them do. So, even this week just gone, there's unfair dismissal applications for people swearing at work that they've been terminated for. People think sometimes the workplace has gone too far, as you mentioned in there earlier. But I thought what we could talk about this week is, how people can, first of all, employees, how you can stay in good favour with your employer and not figure out that you accidentally did something you used to be allowed to do. But also if you're an employer or a small business owner, okay, how do you set those standards for your staff so that you know what you can expect?
Okay, let's have a look at those then.
Yep, for sure. So first of all, thing to keep in mind, and often comes out when an unfair dismissal case, as the worst case scenario comes out, is the context of your organisation matters. Depends the type of work that you do. So if you work in logistics or trucking and things like that, the odd swear word or two is probably more acceptable. People do it, and, it's not as big a factor as it would be if you're serving customers, if you're a government officer dealing with the public and you swear in that kind of context that differs. So there's no one hard or fast rule. It depends on the organisation, its culture, and how people conduct and operate themselves there. Going on a step from there, it also depends on what you've been told as an employee or what you've told your staff. Has your manager or have you told your staff that this is the standard expected? They're not allowed to swear. They're not allowed to engage in those kind of conduct. They're not allowed to drink in the workplace, things like that. If it's written down, if it's in your job description, if it is in anything that's been verbally or written to you, then there's a much better chance.
Yeah, I was going to say, Jonathan, oftentimes they have these HR work modules that you have to sit down and watch, and they really do explain things very clearly in those too, don't they?
They do. So, often if you've gone through those, there is a bit of a responsibility on the employer, not just to pump all this information at you, but also to make sure you understand and see that that's how the organisation operates, which leads me to my next point. If HR or the organisation gives you things to read, training modules to do, yet don't apply those in the workplace, so you see people getting away with all that kind of stuff because no one picks anyone up on it, then sometimes that creates a problem for the employer because there's a general custom and practice as to people don't listen to that or, HR told you to do it, but we don't actually do it. So, whatever the organisation does tell you to do needs to be consistently applied fairly and equally to all its employees. And the more that it turns a blind eye to these things, the more chance an employer has of being forgiven for any wrongdoing they have in the workplace that might, technically go against the policy but is consistent with how others operate.
Yep.
But probably to bring all that to a head with rather than trying to figure out how can I push my boundaries as much as possible, I think, in reading these cases, they come out week by week. As an employer or an employer, have a think about if I perform this action or do this behaviour, how would I feel about this being on the front page of the paper, or how would I feel about this being talked about on radio? So I think instead of just going, how much can I get away with, that whole pub test, the old common sense test, just think to yourself, all right, and I use it as an example, but if I swore or said those words to a person and it went through and I got terminated for it and had to make my case, would I be proud to stand up and have my name on the front page of the paper with the news reporting that's what I did? And I think that's what companies are really quite worried about, their reputation, how it looks to them if they let people get away with behaviour that's not acceptable in a contemporary context. But as an employer, think about going, gee, I don't know if I should do this or not. Would I be happy with it being on the front page of the paper and my sister, brother, mum, dad, kids reading this? And I think that's generally the easiest way to go about thinking about whether or not my behaviour is sailing close to the wind or not.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's very, very helpful. Thanks very much, HR expert Jonathan Wolfrey. We'll talk again next week.
No worries. Look forward to it. Thanks, Anthony.
Triple M.